Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Hunter Ohanian. I'm the director of the Stonewall National Museum and Archive. We're very happy to have all of you here this evening. And I'm very happy to have Dr. Ramona LaRoche here. Ramona, say hello. Nice to see you.
Hello, how's everyone? Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're so happy to have you here. Where are we finding you this evening? Where are you?
This evening, I'm actually in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Oh, nice. What brings you there?
I'm here to support a sister friend whose mother is transitioning, and she flew in from North Carolina, and I told her I would drive and meet her here. So I'm
Yeah.
here for a day or two to connect
Well,
with her.
Well, thank you so much for what you're doing. And it's just, it's a great situation to, to actually be there for somebody else like that. And so thank you for taking the time to being with all of us this evening. For those of you who don't know about Stonewall, you can find out everything about us at stonewall-museum.org. We're located here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We have one of the largest LGBTQ libraries in the United States with over 28,000 volumes. And in our archives, we have 2,700 linear feet of material in our archives representing LGBTQ history mostly from the last quarter of the 20th century to the present day. And if 2,700 linear feet doesn't mean anything to you, imagine 6 million pages of material about LGBTQ culture, mostly from the southeastern United States, but really we have stuff from all over the United States. And so we do these talks. We started these in the beginning of the pandemic. This might be talk number 37 or 38. It's been a great series. These things are being recorded and posted on our website. So if you have friends who are interested in hearing it, they can certainly see that. Give us about a week to get the tape up there. And we also are simulcasting this through Facebook Live. And so for our friends on Facebook, hello, nice to see you all. And we're happy to have everything there. And also want to do a shout out to Emery Grant. Emery is our deputy director. He's behind the scenes here. Emery, are you there? Show yourself if you're there. I don't see you right now. Let me open this up. There's Emery. Hello, Emery. Thank you. Emery helps us get all these things together, and so we're very thankful for the work that he has to do. One last note too is that Ramona and I will be speaking in the first part of this, but then we try to save the last 15 minutes for questions from the audience. We might interrupt with a few questions, but if you have questions as you think of them, please feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A area here, and we'll be keeping track of those as well. So, Ramona, tell us a little bit about the library.
Okay. I'm at the African American Research Library and Cultural Center in Fort Lauderdale, and it is part of the Broward County Library System. The library has been in existence for 18 years. We just celebrated our 18th anniversary. And we sit right in the heart of the Sistrum community, which is the historically Black community of Fort Lauderdale. I've been on board 2.5 years. I actually came to the library from Low Country, South Carolina, where I hail from Charleston and Georgetown, South Carolina. I'm a 6th-generation Gullah Geechee woman. And I decided to come to Florida. It's interesting, I had come to a conference about a year before I got the job. It was the Museum Association of the Caribbean. And one of the places that we visited was at the library. So it was very interesting that a year later, I actually started working there.
It's nice to be able to make those connections when you have a trip to do something professionally, and then you make a place, and then you make an acquaintance with the place, and then you end up working there. Isn't that great?
Yes, it is. We're very fortunate in that in addition to having a traditional circulatory library, we also have special collections and an archives. We have a 300-seat auditorium. It's a professional theater. And we also have a 5,000 square foot art gallery, which is the size of an NBA basketball court.
Wow.
And we have seminar rooms and we have a conference room, and those are available when we're open. Of course, we're not open for that part of the library presently, but before COVID, we also rent those spaces out to community and other organizations as well as our own programming.
Do you know much about the founding of the African American Research Library and Culture Center? What its initial goals were?
Yes, there was a branch. The Mizell branch started in the area initially, and they had talked about getting a larger library. And um, Mr. Sam Morrison, who used to be the director of the Broward County Library, it was his dream to get our library built. And he, along with supporters, raised the funds in order to get the library built.
Mm.
There's more to the history. We have an animatronic in our gallery, and it's Mr. Morrison, animatronic, and he tells the entire story about the history of the library and how it got funded and so forth. But it's a great story.
So pre-COVID, it's sort of nice to think about things before COVID, but who were the average visitors? How were people using the resource? I know you guys have had a lot of respect by different people in the field. And so just give us a sense as to the accomplishments of the organization.
Okay, so pre-COVID, the library, because it's a research library, we've done that all along, but we were blessed over the last couple of years to get a new director who came in, Miss Makiba Foster, and she actually was recruited from the Schomburg Library in New York City.
Sure.
One of her key goals was to get our research area more fortified. We were really looking to build our collection, as well as to have people to come in and speak specifically around research related to the African diaspora. And since that time, she began a program called Cultural Conversations, and once a month she was bringing usually academics, but sometimes it was other people as well. But it was always related to our culture and history. We have a large programming program, and librarians on staff are responsible for creating programs, but we also have a programming department. So we do internal programs, but we also rent out space for community members that want to do programs. It might be sometimes Broward Sheriff Office is doing a training in our auditorium, or it might be something related to Haiti, So it's a variety of people that have come through. We also have the South Florida Book Festival. This year was done virtually, but a year ago we did it and it was quite successful. We generally have books for children, youth, as well as adults. We have a great Comic-Con conference, and again, that was virtual this year, but a year before we did it, and it was really a great phenomenon. I was really impressed. My colleague that puts it together, Trey Fitzpatrick, he really has a good sense of that whole group of people. And so there were people that came in costumes and really like Star Trekky types and all kinds of people. And he also brought the gentleman, and his name slips me now, but he's the person that created Doonesbury. He's out in California. So he brought him as a keynote, and it was just it's a great time. So, we've been doing a variety of things. Our youth department, usually we have a chess club for children. We have a young engineering program. We've been doing quite a variety of things, for the community, and economics, computer classes. We do have a computer lab. So we do anything from teaching people how to use Excel to how to use their smartphone. And so our users are a mixture of people. We have people that come in just to use computers, but then we have people that come into research, and we service everybody. So we've got our regulars. We have some people that are between homes, if you will, and we do serve our homeless community as well. And it's been a very interesting a variety of people that come into our space, and it makes it really exciting every day to come in, because I never know what I'm going to expect. It's fun. So
Yeah,
um,
no, I think that's really important. And when you speak of the term research library, tell the audience a little bit more about what distinguishes their regular public library from a research library.
okay, so our research library, if you have a person that wants to come in and do specific stuff related to our collection. So some of our highlights, for example, we have an Esterol collection, and
Oh,
you
yes.
may know that Esterol from the Good Times was from Pompano Beach.
Yep.
So in her collection, we have things related to her awards, her albums, her clothing, a variety of things, photographs and so forth. And this year, this month, we would have celebrated her 100th birthday. So
Wow.
we have a play that's been planned, and it would have been, but because of COVID, it has to be pushed back. I believe the new date for the play, if all goes well, will be March, but nothing is written in stone, what's going on today. But
Sure.
we did do some virtual programming around it, and that's one of our highlights of our collection. We also have some of Alex Haley's works. We also have Mr. Morrison, the founder that I told you about. We have a large collections of his stuff. We have the Hewitts, who were a large collection of Haitian and Caribbean artwork. So we have a lot of artifacts. We have memorabilia, a wide range of things, albums, you name it. We've got a lot of African stuff from all over the continent, from um, balafons, which are like an African xylophone,
Sure.
to soapstone from South Africa, headpieces and so forth. So I encourage folks to come through, because we have some beautiful stuff in our collection.
And you have a number of those pieces on exhibition from time to time as well, too, right?
Yes, we always have something on exhibit, both in our lobby as well as in our gallery.
So you have your PhD, and
Yes.
and so when you went to school, and particularly when you got your doctorate, what was your focus and what did you want to do with the education that you got?
Okay, so I had been toying with this whole idea of doing a doctorate for a while, and I was like, oh, do I want to do history? Do I want to do American studies for a while? So I happened to be at a Black Power conference in Charleston, South Carolina, at the Avery Research Center. And I spoke to a woman, and I told her my interest, and she said, well, there's a great program at the University of South Carolina, and it's in the Library and Information Science Division, and they actually have a grant that you can apply for. It's a funded program, and it's called the CHILL program, Cultural Heritage Informatics Leadership Program. So I made a call, and I was invited to come up and meet the team and see what the school looked like. And I applied, and I got accepted. And I actually was the last recipient of that grant. It was an IMLS funded grant, and it paid for the 4 years for me to attend the PhD program.
Mhm.
I was particularly interested because my background, I'm a former art educator. So I taught K through 12. I taught in Georgetown and Charleston, South Carolina. But I found, as many places across the country, art was being diminished. I mean, the special areas were just getting cut, cut, cut. So I went from one school, and finally, when they said they wanted me to go to 4 schools with the same spending budget, I decided no, it's time to leave. So I applied for the program, and I went back to school.
And you actually, did you go to school for being an art maker? Were you at the School of Visual Arts as well too?
Yes, yes. I got a Bachelor of Fine Arts in photography and with a minor in art therapy. So I
Yep.
actually worked in psychiatric hospitals and various settings, special needs populations. I said you're using art as a healing modality.
And are you still making art yourself now?
Not nearly enough. I do photograph. I do
Amen to
photograph.
that. I mean, I feel the same way. I don't make nearly enough now either. So,
Yeah, I do photograph, but I'm particularly interested now in the whole digital humanities area. I was blessed to be able to become a curator for an exhibit that we did throughout the state, a traveling exhibit on virtual reality for the Harlem Renaissance period. And
oh,
I took that exhibit throughout the state, and it gave me a whole nother venue or feel in terms of interest, in terms of content development. So I'm pursuing my interest in virtual reality as well now.
and so just out of curiosity, what was the year that you did that Harlem Renaissance exhibition?
Actually, the grant ended. My report was due kind of like just before COVID, and everything got kind of extended. So when I took it over, it was like kind of the last few say 6 months that I
Well,
got to travel with it.
I would love to be able to see some of the results of that because, of course, in the LGBTQ community, there's a tremendous amount to speak about there, and so I think it's a great thing that you've done. So so let's talk a little bit about so the library's focus, of course, is on African American. Let me stop there. So, what kind of conversation goes on with regard to language at the library, African American versus Black? Talk to me a little bit about.
What do you mean by African American versus Black?
Well, so so the name of the organization is the African American Research Library, but
Yes.
then there's also conversation of, in the United States about people, non-Caucasian people who prefer to be called Black. And
Okay.
the reason why I asked that question is that in the when I grew up with what was the gay community, and now we have terms, LGBTQ, language actually moves around. And so I'm sort of curious about how you guys deal with the choice of particular words.
Okay, so I can't really speak to how they determine the name for our library, but I will say that because of the community in which we live, we have to take into the fact that it includes Caribbean American, particularly, we have a large Haitian community in South Florida,
Yep.
Jamaicans, Bahamians, um, and I mean Esther Roll herself was a Bahamian descendant, for
Yep.
example.
Yep.
I'm also the genealogy librarian at Arlick, so that comes up a lot. I mean, you talk to people, and lo and behold, there's that Bahamas are coming up and so forth. And I've done a lot of cemetery research in South Carolina, and now my interest has kind of moved to this area. So when we're talking about African American, I guess for me the term basically means that it's Americans with coming from the continent of Africa with diasporic people from all over. I mean, we've got, there's Brazilians here, it's just so many, it's a hodgepodge of people of color all over the world. So, and particularly in South Florida, that's what makes it so tasty and delightful, because we have people from everywhere.
Yeah, no, and that's a wonderful way of looking at it. And what I always find interesting, of course, is that language can be so helpful at times, but also it can be vexing and confusing at times
And
too.
it,
And I'm old enough to know that when I was a young gay man, everybody who was homosexual at that time was considered gay. But
right,
then there were lesbians and gays and trans and queer and everybody else. So
right.
things evolve.
They do. They do. I can remember. I worked for the Minority Task Force on AIDS in New York many years ago. I was their education director, and I remember having to administer a grant, and the label was WSWs and MSNs, men who slept with men or women who slept with women, but
I
did not
remember
consider
that.
themselves to be gay or lesbian. So that was another title, if you will.
Yes, I totally forgot about that. It was men who slept with men. Yes,
Right.
yes.
Right.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that title. Isn't
Right.
it funny? And these titles and these words you know, as we're talking to each other and just thinking about, you know, who we are as human beings, these words somehow have no meaning.
Right, right, right.
So,
And my own partner, he gets confused sometimes. He says, "Can you explain what this means to me? Am I, you know, what does transgender mean? And him, how do I approach this person? Or like, what do they mean by they and them? And you know, so it's a lot. It's a lot.
yes, and you know that's a good point because obviously those questions about pronouns are obviously a very big question these days, and some people have not issues, but they just have questions about them, and they just need to be helped through the process to understand how people
Right.
understand it. So at the library, you guys have an LGBTQ collection, and so tell us something about that.
Okay. Let me begin. Let me go back a little bit. So, when we were having the 50th anniversary of Stonewall across the country, I decided I wanted to do a program because that was one of our themes, that we could do through the library. We get themes each month that if we want to do programming around. So I was like, oh, I'd like to do a theme around Stonewall. I'm a New Yorker, so I'm like, okay. So I wanted to do a program, but I realized that I was new to the community. I didn't really know, who to reach out to. So I saw that you guys were having a program at Stonewall. So I came to the program and I said, well, maybe I'll meet some people there. So I came to the program. I enjoyed the program tremendously. It was good, but I looked around and I only saw two people that looked like me.
Yeah,
They were Black women.
only two
Everybody else
people
looked
of
like me.
color. You saw a room of 50 people and only two people of color.
Right, besides myself. And when the talk ended, that couple went outside and I followed them outside. And I introduced myself and told them, why I was there. I was trying to reach out. And fast forward, the one of the women, and her name is TJ Boyd, she agreed to help me coordinate my program. So fast forward, we did a program and we had a panel. And on the panel, we had Dr. Cobb, formerly Dr. Parker. We had what is Christopher's last name? I can't remember Mr. Christopher's last name right now. We had a young woman representing the trans community. We had a moderator, Jeanette, or also G, who does a program called Women Thou Art. Um, and 45 people attended the program.
Oh,
It was the first time that the library had ever had a program for this community.
so let me interrupt you here.
Yes.
So were there any was there any resistance within the library about doing a program
No,
about LGBTQ
no,
community?
none at all.
Yeah.
None at all. None at all. It was very supportive. We got word out because it was one of our themes.
Yeah.
So we got word out. Publicity and so forth, and it went very well. And people that attended, they actually thanked me. They said, the library had never provided an invitation for anything like this, and we're really thankful. So we decided that we're going to try to have an ongoing and do something to follow up. Well, of course, a year passed, and it was June, and we talked about doing some things, and then we got through the summer, and then next thing you know, COVID was here.
Right.
So, but all along, I was trying to reach out to several organizations, particularly the community of POCs, people of color related to the community, and if they might have something related to archives that we might be able to look at. Meanwhile, one of my coworkers from programming, he came and he bought me a box, and the box was full of the BLK magazines.
All right, so let's
And
stop here. Let's stop here. So tell everybody what BLK is, because of course I know because we had an exhibition, but tell people what that's about.
So Black Magazine was published by the editor Alan Bell, and Alan Bell was one of the leading figures of, I guess, gay publications in New York City. He initially started in New York City, and then he later went on to Los Angeles area, and he started these magazines, and he connected with Phil Wilson, who was part of the AIDS community. He was an AIDS activist, and his magazine morphed from there. And even though it was predominantly kind of for gay men, the stories connected the entire African American community. So there were stories about Patti LaBelle, Dennis Rodman, all these different people. So even though, it was kind of geared towards the target of the market was gay Black men, the stories were for the community, if you will.
Well, yes, of course. And there were people like Audre Lorde who were on the cover. And,
right. Because you have
James Baldwin. I mean, he worked very hard to get true literary and cultural figures within the community who were actually role models for the LGBTQ community within the Black community to get them involved. And even like Huey Newton, talking about whether or not, the strife between the gay and straight community and the Black and white community. He was putting those stories out there.
So, once I saw that, we got a new archivist too, and she came to us from Yale, which was really a blessing. And so after speaking with my director, I went to the archivist and I told, what we had and what we wanted to do. And she said, well, let me speak to my supervisor because her supervisor is in in collection. So he had to kind of give the approval. Once he did the approval, she allowed me to process the collection. So that is actually the only known artifacts right now that we have related to the LGBT community. That's it. So fast forward, we now have some other entities that are interested in getting some stuff in the library as well. And if I may, I can share some with you. So Dr. Naomi Ruth Cobb, and she used to be Naomi Parker. She had a nonprofit that existed about 10 or 12 years. And she did a conference called the Only Women's Conference. And that conference went on mostly through the 90s. And she partnered with Broward County Library. And anywhere from 150 to about 700 women came to that conference annually. And it kind of morphed. And she actually said herself, when I met with her to look at, her collection, she said after a while, after about 12 years, I got a little tired, so I think she disbanded the nonprofit, but she's still very active, between the Tri-County area with her work. So what we're doing is we're going to get her materials, and we have one of our library staff people from administration who was around that time too, was able to share some materials as well. So I'm in the process now of processing that as well. So that will be the second area that we'll look at. Since then, we've also connected with Jeanette Rhea Wright, and G is also, she does a Woman Thou Art. So, they do music and art and poetry and so forth. And she also is getting together some documents as a donation to our library to be processed. So that's kind of what I've been looking at. There are three other people I want to mention. TJ Boyd, who is the woman that I mentioned earlier that I met at your place. She has an organization, and the entire name is slipping me. I apologize, I should know it, but it's the Gardenia Society, I think. But it's a society that a fraternal org that's dedicated to lesbian women who identify as femme.
Okay.
So they have an annual event, kind of like, I don't want to say secret society, but it's kind of protective, if you will. So we've been in conversation because I've been trying to say to her, well, is there anything that you can share that in 10 or 20 years from now, people could look back and say, oh, this started in South Florida. So she and I are kind of still having conversation. Then Nikki Lopez, I think you guys may know her. She does the Elephant Project, like the Elephant in the Room. And she's an artist herself, so she works with artists as well. So she's been a part of the conversation. And then finally, Crew Make Do, who's based in Atlanta, she's doing a national project, the Black Lesbian Archive. And she's been collecting stuff, but her archival piece, she doesn't really know how to do that. So we're trying to see what we can do specific to materials related to South Florida and how we might be able to assist her. And so those are pretty much the key areas or the key components of the people that are part of this puzzle right now.
And that's terrific. And so, you know, obviously it goes without saying that if there's any way that we can work together on any of those projects, we're more than happy to do it. Just to talk a little bit of shop here, and to our viewers, just I ask that you indulge us for a minute here. But so at the Stonewall Library, we have 2,700 feet of archival materials, about 6 million pages. And most of the stuff, like many nonprofit archival organizations, a lot of it just comes from the donors. There are very few funds available to craft a collection which is curated toward a particular time period. And so what we found is that a lot of the material that we have in our collection is material that has come from older white men who have moved to South Florida from New York or Boston or Chicago or Los Angeles or something else, and they brought this stuff down with them. And so what's nice about it is, of course, they've kept a lot of these things, but it tends to be somewhat skewed in a particular way. And what I'm very curious about now is that when I look at the depth of what we have in our collection, which is quite extensive, I also think it's biased, not in an intentional standpoint, but just from a circumstantial standpoint.
Right.
And that those materials are the ones that come over the transom. So then as our ideas about being far more inclusive about many of these things, how do we collectively go about and make our collections to be more inclusive going forward?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's an ongoing discussion. It makes me think of when I worked at the Minority Task Force on AIDS, and I was trying to deal with the gay man's health crisis. I mean, how you balance those kind of things out, because there were two different communities in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So I think that's a discussion we'll probably have to have outside of this particular call, Zoom. But I agree. How do you open it up? And I don't know, perhaps some committee, some people specifically in place to, help that happen.
Yeah.
Certainly, we can brainstorm some more.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that offer, but for me, it's really, as we watch society kind of roil out there, in the middle of this election and everything that's going on with regard to racial tensions, we saw however many people vote for somebody 2 weeks ago. 70 million people vote for a particular individual that might not have the most inclusive or diverse attitudes in his policies. That it seems like there is a big desire to have individuals sort of work harder. Certainly I work harder as a result of it, to figure out how we can be more inclusive with regard to whether it's gender or race or sexual orientation or religion or anything else, because obviously those things don't really make any difference at the end of the day as far as the human experience is. Yeah. But we live within a system in which those things are very important to a lot of other people out there, and they want to divide things up in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things we've been working on recently is we've been looking at publications that we don't have in our archives, LGBTQ publications that might be from the African American community or the Latino community or the Asian community. And so we're beginning to identify those and then figuring out ways how we can actually bring more of those publications into our collection. Have you had an experience of trying to broaden a collection in that particular way?
Oh yes, we have. You know, as librarians, we get to read books and order new ones. So definitely, I'm always looking for materials related to the community, and even our book club. We recently read "Girl, Woman, Other" by Bernardine Evaristo.
Sure.
She won the Booker Award in the UK for her work. And it was a wonderful book. It's a novel, but she kind of looked at these 12 diverse women, but you know, they had a lot of connection, even though they were very different, you know, straight women, gay women, young women, old women, um, domineering women. It was just a very interesting read, but it was also interesting because when we discussed the book, you know, we had people from the UK that joined us as well. And so that's what's been nice about these Zoom calls, that now we like tapping, you know, internationally with people. It's just opened up, you know, I've met some, you know, new connections as a result. So it's been nice. So I guess that's the flip side of COVID, even though we're all zoomed out, but you know, on the other hand, it opens up the reach, if you will.
Yeah, well, we certainly have found that in the sense that once we started this series of these talks every week, I mean, some of these talks, we can have 100 people, 200 people follow these talks. And, um, and that's actually very nice because you get to reach a much broader audience than you would have before.
Exactly. Exactly.
Tell us, tell us a little bit about, you know, again, with COVID being here, what plans do you see for the library going forward, both virtually and also in person?
Okay, so virtually, we have been diligently working with programming and working with people that are doing, you know, camera work and, you know, and getting our own training to do a little better editing jobs and so forth. Because we know that it's more than just, you know, training on your laptop at your desk. So, you know, you have to create environments and so forth. So it's been a learning curve, and it's been a lot of learning curves for all of us. So that's been a good thing. We have recently just talked with administration about what the training needs are to move forward. And I really only want to speak to the virtual piece because no one knows what's going to happen in terms of when we're going to open up again. You know, as I said, we just opened, this is the third week that Broward County Library has been open to patrons again. And we're only doing 5 days a week instead of 7, and staff is doing 4 days, you know, rotation. And I don't know, you know, the county will make that decision in terms of, you know, opening and stuff. So I really can't speak to that part. So I can only say that we're just trying to fine tune and continue to plan for programs. Right now, we're planning pretty much virtual programs. I mean, out through probably February or March is what we're looking at right now, because, you know, nobody knows, and with the numbers, you know, increasing again, you know, it's a little scary. It's a little
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah,
Mhm.
no, it's definitely true here in South Florida. Well, it's not even just here in South Florida. Every time I said to my colleagues at work today, you know, I listen to these numbers right now. We're what today, November 19th. And um, you know, as bad as things were, Florida, of course, for those of you who are watching this at some other point in time, you know, Florida was very bad in the summer and the rest of the country was very down on Florida at the time. Now our numbers are not as bad as they are at other parts of the US. But every time I see these numbers and these infection rates and the death tolls go up, I think, should I just go into the museum and close it tomorrow, you know, so that there's no public interaction. And it's a really hard decision to make at this point. I mean, for us at Stonewall, you know, we're limited to 10 people. We have very good COVID protocol in place, but compared to the county libraries, we've been open since the first week of July. And
Mm.
so, yeah. And so, um, And sometimes people will come into the library and they'll just bring their donation or return their books right at the door, and they don't want to deal with anybody. And
Right.
then other people will have their masks on and they'll want to be engaged because they'll be seeking human interaction. And I think for all of us, that's where the conflict actually comes, in the sense that how much are we seeking human interaction versus how fearful are we of the situation? And both of those positions are 100% valid. And
Yes.
so,
Yes.
so it's a quick question of thinking that stuff through.
Yep.
Um, yeah. So in the community that you serve, do you have a sense as to how well the LGBTQ portion in the community is doing these days?
I don't.
Yeah,
I don't.
yeah.
I really don't.
It, it makes me wonder, or go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I recently put an effort to reach out to someone who had done some oral histories for our library. And I haven't talked to her yet, but one of the conversations I want to have with her is in all of her interviews, had that ever come up? Had anybody ever mentioned anything? Because I have a feeling that even though it hasn't been said outright, that there may be something in our collections that just was overlooked or pushed under the carpet. And so I'm that detective trying to see if I can find some of those stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and of course, I mean, I'm hugely interested in how the Black community in South Florida evolved. And what I'm interested about that is that so much of sort of the obvious and sort of the mainstream view of the LGBTQ community in South Florida has really been about the white male community. But we all know there had to be another thing going on there that wasn't written about in the magazines and the newspapers, and was
Right.
under the radar in some way. And I'm very curious to know more about that particular part of our heritage here, to be sure that those voices have not been forgotten in this whole process.
Well, I think that's what Julio, and you had Julio on a few months ago.
Julio Capo. Yes. So, yeah.
Right, right. I mean, in his book on Miami, that whole era in the 40s, I think his book is based. I mean, and he begins to kind of touch a bit on it. So, I think like everywhere else, gay people have always been a part of our community. But I was talking to my sister tonight at dinner, and I said, yeah, but they were the people that played at, for the church choir, and it was all right for them to play good music. But, you didn't talk about anything else in the Black Baptist church. I mean, but people knew, but it was just kind of like, you didn't broadcast it and so forth. So,
Yeah.
it'd be interesting to kind of see. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And it's one of those kind of things that when you think about other divisions within the community, that in many cases, not all cases, of course, but in many cases, one's race is obvious or one's gender is obvious. One's sexual orientation is not always obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
so there are people who have lived through various periods of time in which they've had to suppress who they were as individuals.
Right. Right. When you said that, it made me think of that movie with Glenn Close. You know,
Which one?
where she becomes a man and she binds
Oh
her
yeah.
breasts and stuff. What was the name of that movie? She's got a derby on, and I think it's Ireland, and in
Yeah,
the 1800s or
I
something.
can't
Yeah.
I can't remember it either, but you know exactly what I'm talking about with
Right.
that. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Well, it's great to chat with you and to see and to hear about everything. Oh, let me just see if we have any more questions or chats here. Hang on one second. Uh,
Okay.
no open questions here. Um, well, so one last thing I want to just pose with you is the idea of, as you think about the work that you've done with us in the past by coming to our events, and now that you know us, does anything come to mind about how we can be working together as professionals in the field to be able to serve the constituencies that we serve at each organization?
I would love to have a meeting of our respective archivists involved, because they could speak more to, what's in the collection and, what may be relevant to each other. And certainly our director is interested in that. So that's the initial thing that comes to my mind.
That's
Uh,
great.
and I mean, we can probably talk about some stuff related to this coming June and 21, maybe, another, Stonewall event. Those are the things that come in mind, because maybe by June, maybe we'll be able to have some resemblance of a community gathering again, and if not, maybe we'll have to come outside and do it, or, but that's the initial thing that I think of.
Well, of course, we would be very happy to have any of those kind of conversations to be able to um, open them up. And I mean, what I find interesting too about some of this is the fact we have two professionals here sort of talking about their respective institutions who are looking for ways to diversify and open their doors up to more individuals. Um, which you did touch on this a little bit, but um, let me let me probe it with you, and this is just a little bit of a professional curiosity on my part.
Okay.
So, and again, this might be somewhat pre-COVID, but what do you think? How is your library serving as a resource to individuals or members of the public? I mean, we all know there's a certain section that comes in because they want to borrow books. They don't want to buy them from Amazon. They simply want to borrow books. And then we have a number of people who come in because they want to borrow DVDs and take those out and watch those.
Right.
And then we have people who come in because they want to use the computers and print something. We also know there are people who come into libraries today just to hang out because it's a safe place that they can just hang out for a while. And then we also know that there are a number of activities that we create within these libraries, whether it's a book club or a film club or you were talking about a lot of other workshops that you guys were doing too. I mean, as you say, even how to use your iPhone. But so what is the future of libraries' role in sort of bringing people in and attracting them to this place, which is this amazing repository of all of this knowledge that we have in this one physical spot? It's in a funny way, it's almost like, what are the tricks that bring people in to be able to be attracted to what we have?
I think it's a variety of things. I mean, yesterday we had turkey giveaways,
Wow.
you know. So I think that we have to find links that people are interested in, um, ways of empowering communities. I think, for example, community archiving, which has like oral history component where people can cur- create their own narratives, I think is very important. So I'm interested in, when we open up again, perhaps people bringing in stuff to add to collection, but we don't necessarily take their stuff. Maybe we do a digital project and we scan their stuff instead, so they can keep their own keepsakes, but we have record of it.
Mm.
Or those kind of empowering tools. I think more liaisons with churches, particularly in our communities, is really important, because we know that churches are leaders in many communities, and sometimes communities will listen to churches when they won't listen to other things. And that's why historically, people have gone to churches around, health issues and voting issues and so forth, because of the power of the church, particularly in the Black community. So I think, trying to find those links and those connections. I'd like to see more activities around technology in our young people,
Mm.
because when people think about going to library school, for example, they think about, oh, a librarian sits at the desk and she gets you your book, but they don't think about database management or, you know, data mining and what that means, and digital humanities and so forth. So exposure is so important. You know, we can't expect to know something if we haven't been exposed to it. And I think it's important that we as community leaders take on that role, and particularly as young elders, as I like to call myself. Now's the time. Yeah, now's the time that we take the, you know, those leadership roles, and we begin to share and pass the baton, because it's time for other people to do the work and step up to the plate. So we have to start grooming people and not wait, you know, until people get, I don't know, 50 years old or something, and then say, oh, you can do it now. You know, we need to be grooming people when they're in their, you know, teens and 20s and so forth. I found in the community that I moved from in South Carolina, that was one of the problems. You know, the elder people did not want to let go. And as a result, they lost a lot of great youth energy that just moved or went somewhere else, because either they couldn't find work, because, you know, older people didn't want to step down and those sorts of things. So I think it's really important that this whole adultism stuff, I mean, we have to just kind of check ourselves around that, and say, you know, young people, they bring a lot. Besides energy, they bring a lot. You know, they bring their technology skills, they bring, you know, so we have to do a lot of give and take with young people, you know, work with them, and not isolate them, but really see how you can come together, you know, and exchange, and catch their vision as well, you know, and not, you know, like I have a friend that likes to say, well, you know, I'm 72 and blah, 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 blah. But, you know, okay, you are. But that doesn't mean that you should not listen to a 21-year-old, you know, so.
No, I think that's so beautifully said, and it's really nice to hear you say that. Um, my take on that exact same issue is the fact that we're kind of the adults at the table now, and if there's anybody going to affect change, it's on us to actually affect that change now.
Right,
And
right.
so, you know, we're not kids anymore in this process. And if
Mhm.
we don't like the way things are, we have positions within educational, cultural, historic, and business organizations that if we really do want change, now's the time for us to do it. We may be of the same mind, and in some ways it's almost as if we're used to saying, well, this is somebody else's problem. But the
Right,
truth is, it's actually our problem.
right.
You know? And I think they're looking to us to actually make some changes that make sense and to listen to them and to hear what's going on. So,
I agree. I
yeah.
agree.
Well, I hope your trip to St. Pete is rewarding, and I hope that I
Thank
know
you.
it's not going to be easy. And bless you for actually being there with your friend and sort of go through this entire process. And thank you for taking the time to be with us here this evening.
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
No, I really do. And it's been a lovely conversation. I've been really happy to hear so much more about the library, but also about a lot of these other issues as well, too. And so it sounds like you're doing great work there. I've been there twice, but I'd love to actually come see you and have a little tour with you there at some point in time, once we can actually get back to doing that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Yeah. So everyone, I just want to say thank you. I'm Hunter Ohanian, and this is our continuing series for the Stonewall National Museum of Archive of talks. If you have friends who are interested in hearing this, it will be posted on our website probably in about another week. If you're on Facebook, hello everybody. I see there are a number of people on Facebook watching this, and so this is great. And also thank you to my colleague, Emery Grant, for doing all the technical stuff here. Emery, show yourself again, just so we get to see you. And thank you, Emery. Emery's doing a great job trying to keep all this program going and trying to keep our world alive here in South Florida and trying to be able to give people as many resources as we can. So thank you, and it's nice to see you again, and we'll be in touch soon.
Okay, thanks a lot. Take care. Appreciate
Thank you.
it. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.